Christmas in the Pokemon world doesn't rush toward you. It arrives the way snow does in the middle of the night, quietly, gently, slowly covering everything until the world simply feels different. The celebrations shown throughout the anime never treat the holiday as something loud or exaggerated. Instead, it becomes a moment of rest. Decorations appear softly in the background. Fires glow inside cozy houses. Pokemon gather together not to fight, but simply to exist beside one another. In several Christmas specials, the focus rests on small gestures rather than grand events. Pikachu and its friends help decorate cabins surrounded by snow-covered trees. Stantler patiently watches from the edges of the scene, lights flickering gently in the quiet twilight. Nothing dramatic happens. No one is racing against time. The holidays unfold like a peaceful dream. Even Jinx, often remembered controversially in later discussions, was first introduced as Santa's calm and loyal helper, responsible and caring, guiding others with patience rather than force. The episodes showed that winter wasn't something to survive. Instead, it was something to share. Years later, when Pokemon Go introduced its first true winter event, that same quiet tone returned. Opening the app in December suddenly felt like stepping into a calmer world. The map softened. The colors cooled. Roads sparkled faintly as if they had been touched by frost. Ice-type Pokemon began appearing in places they normally wouldn't, and Delibird reappeared every year like a visiting relative. Holiday outfits appeared now and then, hats, scarves, tiny seasonal touches not meant to overwhelm, but to gently remind players that time was passing and traditions were returning. What makes those winter events special is how they slow everything down. Instead of pushing players to grind endlessly, they reward small habits, walking, opening gifts, checking in occasionally. The game never demands urgency. It quietly encourages presence. It feels like the digital version of taking a long winter walk. Hands in pockets, listening to the snow beneath your feet while the world grows hushed around you. From there, winter Pokemon begin to reveal their deeper meaning. At first glance, they resemble ice cream, but their concept is rooted in frozen air, solidifying during ancient blizzards. Vanillite is born from cold itself, forming delicate crystals instead of flesh. Vanillish and Vanillux drift through frigid caves and snow-covered mountains, exhaling gentle frost storms. They don't symbolize desert. They symbolize the way winter gives shape to the world icicles, snowdrifts, frozen lakes glittering under moonlight. They feel less like creatures and more like living pieces of winter weather. Then there is Cubchoo, constantly sniffling in the cold, looking small and vulnerable. It captures the part of winter many people understand: the fragility, the need for warmth, the quiet desire to be cared for. When Cubchoo finally grows into Beardic, winter shifts from fragility into protection. Beardic doesn't just survive harsh snowstorms. It leads younger Pokemon across frozen landscapes, demonstrating strength that exists not for dominance, but for guidance. The story told through their evolution mirrors the human experience of winter as well. Cold seasons may feel lonely or difficult, but family, protection, and support transform harshness into refuge. On snowy shores where the ocean meets ice, Spheal rolls happily across frozen beaches, clapping and laughing in the anime as if winter itself were something to enjoy. Celio and Walrein follow, acting as guardians of icy coasts. Their strength is undeniable, but it is warm rather than frightening. They protect their groups, manage their territory, and continue moving through their world with steady confidence. Watching them reveals how winter can hold joy, not loud laughter, but the kind of quiet happiness that fills rooms during holidays, when friends and family gather without fanfare. Meanwhile, Mammoth Swine and its evolutionary line connect the season to memory and age. These Pokemon feel ancient. They resemble mammoths preserved beneath frozen earth, revived as climates shift and time passes. Their presence suggests that winter preserves history. Traditions, stories, and customs survive through it. Snow doesn't erase, it stores. The way humans return to certain songs, foods, and celebrations, every holiday mirrors the way these Pokemon return from long forgotten eras, reminding the world that the past does not disappear, it rests patiently beneath the surface. And then there is Aurorus, glowing softly with colors that look like northern lights drifting through frozen air. Rather than embodying cold as danger, Aurorus represents cold as beauty. Its breath creates shimmering ice patterns, and its presence feels peaceful, almost musical. It embodies the side of winter where lights appear in darkness, not to dispel it entirely, but to make it beautiful. Holiday lights, lanterns, candles, all of them echo that same sense of gentle hope. Not all winter belongs to land. The ocean itself becomes part of the season. Dugong glides through quiet, icy waters, able to sleep while drifting along, body completely at ease. Calm oceans at winter dusk carry that same feeling, stillness, vastness, and a quiet type of safety. Whenever Dugong appears alongside winter episodes, it adds steadiness to the scene, like a reminder that even unseen places remain calm and alive. Blissey, though not an ice type, may be one of the most holiday Pokemon that exists. Its entire identity centers on compassion. It senses sadness instantly and rushes to comfort others, sharing food that restores both health and spirit. In the anime, Blissey gently delivers meals throughout hospitals, tending to others without ever asking for acknowledgement. This reflects the quieter side of gift giving. Not wealth, not spectacle, simply caring for others when they need it most. Togekiss enters this world softly as well. It rarely shows itself during times of conflict. Instead, it appears where harmony already exists, blessing peaceful gatherings and quietly drifting above communities that choose kindness. Its lore describes it as avoiding places filled with aggression. It isn't a fighter. It is a visitor, one that arrives when people choose to live gently. The symbolism aligns perfectly with winter traditions that encourage people to slow down, reconcile, and soften their hearts. Seasonal changes in the games reinforce all of these ideas. In regions with shifting seasons like Unova, winter literally reshapes pathways. Snow piles replace ground. Frozen lakes open shorter routes. Pokemon appear and disappear depending on temperature. Nothing truly changes permanently. The world simply rearranges itself for a time, inviting different ways to move through it. Christmas and holiday seasons in real life behave the same way. Daily life continues, but rituals layer themselves over normal days, altering pace, mood, and rhythm. And perhaps the most striking thing about all winter-related Pokemon content is that it refuses to shout. There are no massive battles tied to saving the holiday, no overwrought lessons delivered dramatically. Everything is smaller, quieter, and more sincere. Winter becomes a pause, a chance for characters and players to rest alongside their Pokemon rather than constantly striving. The creatures most associated with this time of year are rarely conquerors. They are caretakers, watchers, guides, companions, symbols of memory and continuity. They guard snowy forests. They walk gently across frozen fields. They bring warmth to lonely corners. They light the sky softly. They remind players that not every powerful moment needs to arrive with intensity. Sometimes meaning arrives like snowfall, slowly, silently, and beautifully transforming the world, not by force, but by simply being there. And in the Pokemon world, Christmas is never about noise. It is about presence, kindness, shared stillness, and the reassurance that, no matter how cold the world may become, someone human or Pokemon is always nearby. Winter in the Pokemon world always feels like it exists, just slightly out of time. It sits between seasons like a held breath, a moment where everything slows and memory becomes heavier than motion. In this quiet space, certain Pokemon seem to become more present, not because they suddenly appear everywhere, but because they feel like they belong to the cold months in a way others do not. Their stories weave together into something that resembles tradition, the kind of folklore whispered near fireplaces while snow gathers silently outside. One of the earliest winter-connected Pokemon in the anime was Jinx. Beyond its controversies and redesigns later in the franchise, Jinx originally appeared in stories tied closely to Santa, snow, and quiet northern landscapes. In Holiday Hijinks, it helps retrieve Santa's sleigh and restore balance to a holiday that felt like it might fall apart. It never behaves like a villain. Instead, it moves with surprising grace, communicating through slow gestures and careful expression. Jinx represents the part of winter that feels mystical and unknowable, the sense that the world becomes slightly enchanted when snow covers it completely. Even today, it appears in snowy routes across different games, as though it simply migrates between cold regions, carrying that same faint air of mystery with it. From those northern places, the world stretches outward into forests coated with frost, where Pokemon like Snover grow beneath heavy branches. Snover feels like a plant that chose winter instead of resisting it. Its body is coated in snow naturally, and it thrives in climates where other plant Pokemon would wither. When it evolves into Abomasnow, snowstorms begin forming around it instinctively, like weather obeying something older and deeper than meteorology. These storms don't feel like disasters. They feel like seasonal events, the world reminding itself that winter still belongs here. Abomasnow isn't framed as destructive in most lore. Instead, it is protective, ensuring winter remains part of the landscape rather than something erased by human expansion. Hidden among those same forests, Frostlass watches from icy cliffs. Its design draws heavily from legends of lost spirits, wandering snowy mountains, and Japanese folklore beings who drift quietly through the cold, neither entirely benevolent nor entirely cruel. Frostlass freezes intruders with ease, yet in some Pokedex descriptions, it preserves bodies in perfect ice, as though maintaining a silent respect for them rather than discarding them. It becomes another reminder that winter carries beauty and danger in equal measure. The stories built around it do not exaggerate, they simply describe. The fear comes not from violence, but from the silence that feels endless in frozen places. Another Pokemon deeply tied to winter tradition is Stantler, whose antlers emit illusions that calm the minds of those who see them. In several anime scenes, Stantler's presence near snowy towns feels almost ceremonial, like something that appears each year but never overstays. Later, when Hisui introduced Wardeer, that connection deepened further. Wardeer became not simply an animal, but a figure woven into regional culture, a guide used in travel across snowbound lands, a companion respected rather than captured thoughtlessly. In games, it carries the player gently across icy fields, reinforcing again that the role of many winter Pokemon is not to fight, but to transport, protect, or guide. There is also something deeply comforting about how many winter Pokemon help others move through difficult spaces. Lapras ferries travelers across frozen seas. Dugong glides effortlessly beneath ice, creating a sense of safe passage. Even Delibird, comical at first glance, delivers supplies to people who would otherwise freeze or starve in mountain climates. The cold in Pokemon almost never feels like an enemy. It feels like an environment characters learn to navigate with help. Occasionally, winter touches Pokemon in subtler ways. Wooloo, for instance, isn't a winter Pokemon by type, but its fluffy design and role in farm communities evoke images of warm barns, knitted scarves, and villages preparing for snow. In regions modeled after England and Europe, Wooloo appears near towns decorated with twinkling lights, creating a feeling that seasons change together, humans decorating, Pokemon adapting, landscapes transforming. The holidays become communal rather than individual. Many players first discovered how winter affects daily life in Pokemon when they explored Unova under snow. Instead of normal grass, snowbanks shifted landscapes into new shapes. Paths that were blocked before became accessible. Others vanished beneath drifts. Players learned quickly that seasons didn't just recolor existing environments, they changed how journeys unfolded. Some Pokemon came out only during winter months, staying hidden until the first flakes arrived. Watchog, Deerling, and Sawsbuck quietly changed coat colors to match the season, almost like they were participating alongside people instead of existing separately. Suddenly, the world didn't feel static anymore. It felt cyclical. That sense of cycles ties closely to Christmas itself, a celebration that returns each year carrying old songs, repeated rituals, familiar foods, and the comforting weight of repetition. Pokemon mirrors that with returning holiday events. Delibird appears again, costumed Pikachu come back, decorations return to game maps like well-kept ornaments being retrieved from storage. Players open gifts, friends trade, entire communities re-engage not because they're pressured to, but because tradition feels soothing. Then there are moments when winter becomes unexpectedly emotional. One of the most quietly meaningful snow-related themes in Pokemon is the way some Pokemon mourn or remember. Cubone's story isn't seasonal, but winter landscapes in the anime and games amplify its loneliness. Scenes where Cubone sits beside frozen rocks or snow-covered graves highlight one of the realities of winter. Sometimes it emphasizes absence more powerfully than any other season. And yet, like everything else in Pokemon, loneliness never appears without its counterpart. Companionship follows. Journeys continue. Pokemon find trainers or communities, and the silence of winter becomes a place shared rather than endured. Even Professor Oak once acknowledged seasonal behavior when he discussed holiday migrations in various specials and tie-in material. Certain bird Pokemon move south as cold approaches. Others remain perched in snow-covered trees, adapting instead of fleeing. The world reacts to winter the same way living ecosystems do. Nothing is static. Everything shifts, but slowly, gently, predictably. Players and characters adjust without panic. When fans think about Christmas in Pokemon, many remember Santa appearing alongside Jinx, but the deeper truth is that the franchise rarely focuses on a single symbol. Instead, it spreads meaning across many characters. Blissey represents nurturing, Togekiss represents goodwill, Lapras represents safe passage, Delibird represents generosity, Stantler represents guidance, Frostlass represents mystery. None of these Pokemon shout, they whisper. They stand in snowy forests or frozen lakes, existing whether anyone notices or not. It becomes clear that winter in Pokemon is less about celebration and more about reflection. The world does not stop, it simply slows. Towns glow more softly, characters gather indoors. Fireplaces replace campfires, dialogue quiets. The environment, music, and story pacing all subtly match one another, creating a sense that even fictional worlds require pauses. That feeling is deeply human. People across cultures use winter holidays to rest, reconnect, remember, and soften. Pokemon absorbs this instinct naturally. The universe does not bend to fit Christmas. Christmas gently weaves itself into the existing rhythms of the Pokemon world, a world where care, companionship, patience, and observation always matter more than spectacle. And maybe that is why winter episodes and events stick with people long after they forget individual battles or gym strategies. The snow, the lights, the quiet music, the way Pokemon gather without conflict, it all creates a dreamlike space that feels safe to return to again and again. Every December, when Pokemon Go brings back scarves, Delibird, and snow-touched maps, millions of players feel that old familiarity rise once more. Not excitement like a new release comfort, like seeing the same decorations in the same place in your childhood home year after year. Winter in Pokemon is not a climax, it is a lull, a moment suspended gently before the world resumes its pace, and inside that lull, Pokemon become more than teammates. They become symbols of seasons, carriers of meaning, and quiet companions while the world grows cold outside. And somewhere, in snowy mountains, Delibird still carries food through icy winds. In silent forests, Frostlass drifts between trees without leaving footprints. Lapras glides silently beneath frozen seas. Abomasnow stands watch while snow thickens on its branches like a living evergreen. Blissey delivers warmth. Togekiss passes overhead like a silent blessing. And Jinx, Santa's once trusted partner, remains one of the oldest reminders that even in a world full of battles, there is always room for winter magic. Winter in the Pokemon world has a way of making even familiar places feel like they belong to another time. A town that looked ordinary in spring suddenly glows softly beneath layers of snow, roofs outlined in frost, chimneys quietly releasing thin trails of smoke. Lamps in windows look warmer, footsteps sound different. And it's in these quieter versions of places we already know that another layer of Pokemon life reveals itself, one that exists mostly during these colder months and then quietly disappears until the season returns again. Around holidays and winter festivals, Pokemon centers across different regions sometimes decorate in subtle ways. The lights change, simple wreaths or ribbons appear near doors. Nurse Joy continues her routine without comment, yet the environment feels slightly more nurturing than usual. In some anime scenes, Chansey and Blissey gently carry trays of warm food, blankets, and medicine. They move quietly, careful not to disturb resting trainers or injured Pokemon. These moments rarely take center stage, but they feel real, and they reflect something important. The world acknowledges winter by becoming kinder. Some trainers in snowy regions rely heavily on ice-type Pokemon, not for battling, but simply for survival. It's hinted throughout Pokédex lore that people who live in frigid towns learn to work alongside Pokemon the way old cultures once worked with reindeer, sled dogs, or horses. Abomasnow may protect forests. Beartic may guard coastal villages. Lapras becomes a fairy, and Wardeer acts as a trusted traveling partner. Pokemon and people share winter duties as if they have always understood that this season requires cooperation more than competition. In several holiday short films, Stantler and other deer-like Pokemon wander near decorated town squares, stopping briefly before disappearing into forests again. They never feel tamed. They remain wild, but their presence feels respectful, almost ceremonial. Children in the Pokemon world grow up with stories about these creatures visiting during winter nights, not to deliver toys, but to signify that the season has truly arrived. It mirrors how folklore in our own world develops not from literal events, but from emotional truth repeated until it becomes tradition. There is also something hauntingly peaceful about winter caves in Pokemon games. Players enter expecting danger and instead find shimmering crystals, silent chambers, and Pokemon that don't attack aggressively. Snom hides along icy walls. Glalie hovers motionless like a suspended moon. Jinx glides softly across the floor. Trainers sometimes pass through entire areas, hearing only the crunch of their footsteps and the echo of the cave's own wind. The design deliberately invites stillness instead of tension, reinforcing the idea that not every unknown space needs to be frightening. Beyond caves, the coastline transforms entirely under winter's influence. In the anime, ocean scenes during snowy episodes slow dramatically. Waves lose their force, colors grow pale and bluish. Pokemon like Lapras, Dugong, and Walrein move with an almost dreamlike slowness. There's a visual language at work. Winter doesn't simply cool the environment, it calms motion itself. Even the Pokemon most suited to water seem to glide rather than swim. Around lakes and frozen ponds, young trainers sometimes skate while Pokemon slide beside them. Seal spins, Spheal rolls like a playful snowball. Even solemn Pokemon, such as Cloyster, appear less threatening beneath blankets of snow. Certain winter episodes show scenes of towns gathering outdoors for quiet festivals. Lanterns line pathways, fireworks bloom silently against snowy skies, and everyone seems content simply to stand near one another. These depictions add emotional grounding, reminding viewers that Pokemon isn't simply about traveling endlessly forward. Sometimes it's about stopping, standing still, and existing within a season. In Pokemon Go, holiday events evolve slightly each year, adding scarves, hats, festive bow ties, and limited time rewards. Yet the magic isn't in the items, it's in the structure. The event always encourages players to give more than usual. Send gifts, trade, walk with companions, hatch Pokemon that appear winter exclusive. Players form quiet loops through their neighborhoods, bundled in coats, phone lights glowing like small lanterns as snow falls or cold wind moves across fields. The connection between real weather and in-game winter transforms Pokemon from entertainment into ritual. Beyond winter events lies something subtler: generosity baked into Pokemon culture itself. Delabird's existence is based on giving. Blissey heals, Audino comforts, Togekiss blesses peace. Alolan Vulpix rarely attacks outsiders aggressively. Instead, it retreats protectively, guarding its snowy territory with quiet intelligence. Many Ice-type Pokemon are not defined by cold cruelty. They are defined by boundaries soft but firm, reinforcing nature's right to exist untouched. Pokemon like Frosmoth embody this gentleness more than most. It spends nights fluttering above snowy fields, scattering scales that insulate plants and prevent them from freezing. Instead of dominating ecosystems, it nurtures them. The Pokédex describes it with language closer to poetry than science, because the creature itself feels fragile, luminous, and seasonal. Seeing Frosmoth is meant to feel rare, the way a perfect winter night sometimes arrives only once a year. But winter also brings silence, heavy enough to reveal deeper emotions. In the Pokemon world, grief surfaces carefully. Episodes set near snowy graveyards, memorial sites, and quiet mountains often explore how trainers remember lost Pokemon or old journeys. Candles burn beside photos. Pokemon stand silently beside their trainers, sharing the moment without needing to understand it fully. The snow absorbs sound, creating an environment where grief feels held rather than exposed. Even here, companionship remains central. Trainers rarely mourn alone. Cubchoo and its constant sniffles subtly represent vulnerability. When scenes show Cubchoo being comforted by Beardic or other companions, the lesson becomes clear without being stated. Tenderness belongs to winter. Even strong Pokemon need moments where they are cared for instead of expected to endure everything alone. The holiday season emphasizes exactly that kind of softness. Then there are moments of wonder, like the Aurora Borealis-inspired imagery surrounding Auroras. In the anime and games, settings where Aurorus appears are intentionally quiet. Wind drifts slowly, snow glitters reflectively on cliffs, the Pokemon breathes, and frost patterns ripple across the world. Art rarely treats winter as empty cold. It treats it as magic, layered over reality. Pokemon mimics that instinct gracefully. Another winter-related truth across the franchise is that Pokemon simply stay closer to one another. Herds group together, flocks huddle, packs share dens. It's not dramatized, it's biological and emotional at once. Humans mirror this behavior in the anime, gathering in homes, inns, lodges, Pokemon centers, and small-town gatherings. The message slips in naturally. Safety isn't always built from strength. Often it grows from closeness. One of the quietest winter traditions across Pokemon stories involves lantern ceremonies. Towns sometimes release floating lights into icy rivers or snowy skies in honor of those far away. Pokemon stand among the crowds, watching with the same calm stillness as their trainers. Legends say Togekiss sometimes appears during ceremonies like these, circling once before flying into the clouds. Whether literal or symbolic, the visual remains. Peace arriving briefly, acknowledged, then allowed to leave without being held too tightly. Even playful winter moments contain depth. When Pikachu or Eevee wear winter scarves or hats in Pokemon Go or anime shorts, fans smile because it feels familiar, not because it's silly, but because it reminds them that Pokemon exist alongside human celebrations, rather than apart from them. They aren't mascots dressed for marketing. They are companions, sharing seasons. And while the holiday imagery sometimes uses Santa-style ideas, it rarely becomes overly commercial. Santa appears as a kind, humble figure relying on Pokemon help. He isn't glorified. He works, he delivers, he trusts Jinx and other Pokemon, deeply suggesting that even mythical figures in this world survive not through magic alone, but through partnership. Beyond obvious Christmas references, winter also shapes gameplay in subtle ways. Trainers navigate slower. Travel routes occasionally become blocked until snow melts. Items hidden beneath snow only appear when the season arrives. Some Pokemon evolve differently based on climate conditions. The world feels temporarily delicate, reminding players to take their time. Few modern games encourage slowness intentionally, but Pokemon does, especially during colder months. Then comes the theme of generosity again, woven through storylines in gentle gestures. Trainers give hot drinks to strangers. People invite travelers inside to avoid blizzards. Villagers share baked treats with Pokemon. Small scenes remind players that hospitality becomes essential when the world grows harsh. Holiday episodes don't brag about kindness, they simply show it happening everywhere, constantly. Another layer emerges when thinking about mythic or legendary Pokemon who interact with winter differently. Articuno embodies frost not as punishment, but as preservation. Its presence signals a season that needs to rest, forests asleep, lakes frozen, fields waiting under snow. The bird seems to glide rather than flap, as if it respects the silence too much to disturb it. Winter legendaries do not roar, they whisper. Pokemon like Sawsbuck physically transform with each season, shifting colors from green to brown to snowy white. Seeing its winter form for the first time reinforces the idea that the world itself is alive and rhythmic, Seasons aren't cosmetic, they are narrative. They change characters, moods, and paths. Christmas, as a repeated holiday, becomes part of this broader rhythm, fitting into the ecosystem the same way snowfall fits forests. As trainers become older in long running stories, their view of winter also matures. Earlier episodes treat snow as adventure, later arcs treat it as reflection. Sitting beside campfires, characters sometimes revisit earlier journeys, friendships, and mistakes. The snow, always quiet, frames those reflections without judgment. It becomes a mirror, not one that shows what is wrong, but one that allows characters to see what has endured. The more one looks at Christmas and winter inside Pokemon, the clearer it becomes. Nothing exists to overwhelm. Even emotional episodes end gently. The message is rarely fight harder. Instead, it's usually rest, care, stay warm, stay close. Pokemon, who thrive in winter, help express that idea. Frosmoth tending environments, Beardic guiding families, Delibird ensuring travelers don't starve, Blissey healing, Lapras carrying, Togekiss blessing. In this softer universe, Christmas becomes less about spectacle and gifts wrapped in shiny paper and more about something fundamentally human: the instinct to gather light during the darkest time of the year, to share warmth when the air outside feels unforgiving, and to slow down long enough to remember that companionship makes survival gentler. And so, somewhere distant across snowy forests and frozen lakes in the Pokemon world, quiet scenes continue repeating even when nobody watches. A child gently places bread out for Wild Stantler. A Lapras fairy glides through calm waters at dusk. Trainers huddle near a center fireplace while Chansey brings mugs of warm cocoa. Frostlass drifts silently along cliff edges. A Delibird lands briefly near a lost traveler and disappears just as quickly. Snow falls on evergreen trees that seem older than time, layering silently, patiently, without ever asking to be noticed. The world waits. Winter remains. And Pokemon, in their gentle, seasonal way, keep reminding everyone that even during the coldest nights, warmth is something that can always be shared. Winter always seems to slow time inside the Pokemon world. Days grow shorter, but somehow feel longer, stretched gently across pale sunlight and long evenings. People move differently, conversations soften. Even Pokemon that usually seem restless appear content to linger. And because of that change, the season becomes less about travel and more about staying home, staying safe, staying together. In towns that sit close to snowy forests, trainers wake to the quiet crunch of snow beneath their shoes. Pokemon tramp through it beside them, leaving patterns of paw prints that vanish under fresh snowfall by morning. Sometimes children build snow, Pokemon rough shapes meant to resemble Pikachu or Eevee, and the real Pokemon wander up curiously, sniffing at their frozen doubles before darting off again. Little moments like that are never central to any storyline, yet they breathe life into these worlds. They show that Pokemon do not simply exist to fight, they exist to live alongside people, sharing seasons in small, ordinary ways. Holiday celebrations often feature simple festivals. Nothing huge, just strings of warm lights hung across wooden fences, paper lanterns lining paths, food stalls offering hot soup or sweet treats. The camera in the anime lingers on faces, smiles, quiet laughter, rather than loud fireworks or grand stages. Pokemon mingle freely through town squares, not boxed away in balls, but moving as companions among neighbors. Meowth warms its paws near a brazier. Pikachu carries cookies clumsily from one table to another. Wooloo curl up like living blankets around children's legs. These scenes suggest something deeply important in this universe. Pokemon are family, Even the colder, tougher Pokemon adapt to this mood. In mountain regions, trainers who specialize in ice types are often depicted as calm and resilient rather than harsh. Their gyms usually look like part of the environment rather than fortresses. Snow gently falls through skylights. Frozen floors shimmer beneath soft lights. Ice sculptures line walls like works of art. Battles inside these gyms do not feel like brutal competitions. Instead, they resemble tests of patience and respect for the environment. You cannot rush in winter climates. The season itself won't allow it. One of the most striking elements about Christmas adjacent Pokemon content is how freely it mixes ancient folklore and gentle modern life. Frostlass wandering snowy cliffs feels timeless, as though it existed long before trainers. Meanwhile, costumed Pikachu wearing scarves in Pokemon Go look charmingly contemporary. Somehow, both feel correct inside the same universe. The season ties them together. It becomes the bridge between myth and familiarity, between what feels magical and what simply feels cozy. At night, this feeling deepens. Anime episodes set around winter often show long stretches of silence, broken only by the faint wind or distant Pokemon calls. Stars seem brighter, campfires burn lower, characters wrap cloaks or coats tighter around themselves. Their Pokemon sit closer. Snowflakes catch in fur and remain undisturbed. Even without dialogue, the message becomes clear. This is a world that honors stillness. Some winter episodes use that stillness to revisit memories. Old friends meet again after long travels. Trainers reconcile. Pokemon reunited with past companions quietly nuzzle one another, as if confirming that the bond never faded, only changed shape. Snow, in these moments, functions like a blanket. It covers harsh edges. It dulls noise. It lets characters speak softly without fear of being unheard. The games mirror this sensibility beautifully. When players travel through snowy routes, the music usually slows. Soft bells, gentle chimes, muted choirs, snow layers over sound effects too, footsteps dampen, bike wheels slip, and the world feels like it's wrapped in cloth. Sometimes, instead of wild Pokemon leaping aggressively, they appear slowly, almost cautiously, as if respecting the silence. Battling happens, of course it does, but even fights somehow feel less heated. Afterward, trainers wish each other safe travels instead of boasting about victory. Certain towns, especially those in northern regions, seem built entirely around surviving together. Inns provide free shelter. Wild Pokemon roam nearby without hostility. Everyone understands winter is something lived through communally. Shopkeepers speak kindly. Strangers share food. This kindness isn't framed as unusual. It is expected. Winter demands gentleness. Delibird's association with giving makes even more sense viewed within this culture. It does not symbolize wealth or excess. It symbolizes sharing when resources are scarce. In freezing mountains, a single meal can mean survival. Delibird doesn't deliver expensive presents. It delivers necessities, food, supplies, warmth, exactly what someone needs, and nothing extra. That idea aligns beautifully with the quieter meaning behind holidays: generosity grounded in care, not spectacle. There is also the subtle presence of rituals. In some regions, villagers gather to observe first snowfalls. Others light candles along rivers to remember loved ones or missing friends. Pokemon stand alongside them, often mirroring their posture without fully understanding why. That image, human and Pokemon standing shoulder to shoulder under falling snow, evokes something older than either world. Companionship transcends language, species, or tradition. It simply exists. Winter also deepens appreciation for light. When nighttime arrives early, even small glows matter. Fireplace embers, lanterns on porches, twinkling decorations on tree branches. And so many Pokemon reflect that symbolically. Auroras, shimmering with aurora colors, Togekiss drifting through the sky like a moving star, Alolan Ninetales glowing faintly in moonlit snow. Their presence transforms darkness not by destroying it, but by making it beautiful. That distinction matters. Winter in Pokemon doesn't oppose darkness, it coexists with it gracefully. In terms of gameplay lore, many cold region characters rely on Pokemon for warmth. Trainers hold Pokeballs near their coats, joking that the faint hum of energy inside keeps hands warm. In certain episodes, fire-type Pokemon create temporary shelters, melting tunnels through snowbanks so groups can travel safely. But even here, battles remain secondary. The emphasis rests on cooperation Pokemon using their abilities for survival, not just competition. This cooperative theme extends to wildlife behavior. Herds huddle, packs share dens. Ice-type Pokemon sometimes help others acclimate to freezing temperatures rather than driving them away. The Pokemon world subtly reinforces ecological harmony, teaching younger audiences that nature isn't simply something to conquer, it is something to learn, to live with season by season, cycle by cycle. When Christmas-specific imagery appears, it does so carefully. Santa exists, yes, but he relies heavily on Pokemon partners. He treats them with respect. They are not tools. They are companions. Jinx helps guide sleds. Stantler or Tauros sometimes pull loads. The magic of giving becomes collaborative rather than miraculous. And that sends a surprisingly grounded message. Joy doesn't come from impossible miracles, but from many beings working together in small, generous ways. The series also frequently shows holiday meals shared across species. Trainers place extra plates on tables for their Pokemon, who sit in circles around fires or dining rooms. They laugh, they eat, they bump shoulders gently. These images reinforce what many players already feel. Pokemon aren't pets, they're family members sitting at the same table, included in memories that will one day become stories handed down, remembered more for the company than for the details. Perhaps the most moving quality of winter in Pokemon is how it reframes strength. In a world usually defined by battles, gyms, and champion leagues, winter whispers a counterbalance. It reminds players that courage sometimes means resting, asking for warmth, accepting help, and simply staying with the people and Pokemon you care about. Episodes and events rarely say this directly, but they show it repeatedly. And as the season eventually thaws into spring, winter doesn't vanish completely. Instead, it remains inside characters, as memory like a soft layer of snow melting into soil, enriching everything it touched. Pokemon return to other regions. Gyms reopen for serious training. The world speeds up again. But something quiet lingers, a sense of gentleness that surfaces every time the air cools and snow begins to fall once more. Somewhere, deep in snowy forests, a Abomasnow stands silently among pines, unmoved by wind. Off on distant cliffs, Frostlass drifts gracefully beneath a pale moon. In town squares, Blissey continues carrying warm meals and small treats. Lapras ferries families across cold lakes, its back glowing softly against dark water. Trainers light lanterns. Children laugh. Stantler watches, and once again, Delibird appears briefly, delivering exactly what people need before disappearing back into the quiet. This is how Christmas and winter live inside Pokemon, not as noise, not as spectacle, but as a season of calm continuity, shared warmth, and soft reminders that even the coldest nights carry gentle light somewhere within them. There's something quietly reassuring about the way winter repeats itself in the Pokemon world. No matter how many journeys take place, no matter how many regions trainers explore, snow eventually finds its way back into the picture, settling gently over rooftops, forests, and mountains the same way memories settle into the corners of our minds. Each return feels familiar, yet somehow new. And within that repetition comes deeper understanding, not only of the Pokemon who live in cold climates, but of the way people and Pokemon shape winter together. In regions like Sinnoh, winter is not treated as an inconvenience, it is part of identity. Snowpoint City sits nestled in perpetual frost, where people dress warmly and walk slowly, accustomed to icy roads and drifting flakes. Pokemon such as Snover, Glalie, and Snorunt move freely around the outskirts, not seen as dangerous intruders, but as part of the ecosystem. Trainers arriving from warmer places often marvel at how calm life feels there. The world slows naturally because rushing simply doesn't work in snow. You have to adapt step by step, breath by breath. Inside homes and Pokemon centers, heat radiates from stoves and fireplaces. The flicker of flames reflects gently on Pokeballs resting on tables. Trainers press cold fingers around cups of tea, and their Pokemon curl at their feet. Even rival characters soften for a while in these environments, speaking more honestly and quietly than usual. Snow outside creates a strange kind of privacy, like walls made of silence. Conversations feel deeper because they unfold slowly, unhurried by noise or distraction. Holiday-themed markets sometimes spring up in towns, filled with treats wrapped in patterned cloth, knitted scarves, small charms shaped like winter Pokemon. Kids run between stalls, with Pokemon close behind, their laughter echoing softly through the crisp night air. It rarely becomes chaotic. Everything stays gentle. Old songs drift from speakers. Lanterns swing slightly in the breeze. The world feels held together by small rituals rather than grand events. Pokemon themselves often seem to understand these rhythms. Herds of Sawsbuck change coats as the seasons turn, and the winter form carries a quiet dignity. Darker tones, thicker fur, heavier antlers, shaped like snow-laden branches. Watching a herd of them move along a frosted ridge feels almost ceremonial. They walk in deliberate patterns, tails raised lightly, breath fogging in the air like faint clouds. Entire routes change just from their passing. Elsewhere, communities that live close to the sea prepare for winter by depending on Pokemon relationships built over generations. Fishermen respect Lapras as partners, not tools. Sailors wait for calm weather rather than pushing through storms. In colder oceans, dugong glide beneath frozen surfaces, while trainers carefully cut breathing holes for wild species that pass through. There is no sense of dominance between humans and nature. Instead, winter brings humility. People recognize limitation, a theme Pokemon rarely states directly, but constantly lives through. Another subtle, yet powerful detail appears in how trainers care for injured Pokemon during this season. Rather than running battles nonstop, characters often spend time learning about medicine, cooking restorative food, and building shelters. In snowy environments, captured Pokemon are sometimes released temporarily to travel with their families through migration routes, reinforcing that capture isn't ownership, it's partnership with boundaries. Winter reveals those boundaries more clearly than any other season. Not everything belongs to you. Some things must remain wild. In older holiday anime shorts, Pikachu and friends occasionally find themselves lost in forests filled with lights, not electric ones, but soft, glowing berries or lantern-like plants. Pokemon gather under them the way people gather beneath decorated trees. The visuals feel deliberate, The world itself participates in celebration without being decorated artificially. Nature already knows how to create beauty. Humans simply join in. Meanwhile, Pokemon Go quietly introduced a tradition of costumed winter Pokemon that began to feel expected year after year. What started as a few Santa hats soon became scarves, ear warmers, bow ties, and even themed Delibird accessories. Players laughed at first, then became attached. Each returning holiday event is like opening a familiar box of ornaments. You recognize each one. It carries memories. It reminds you of previous winters, previous catches, previous walks through neighborhoods lit up at night. The game unintentionally turned digital Pokemon into seasonal keepsakes. But perhaps the most meaningful parts of winter in Pokemon are the ones that brush against loneliness and then gently soften it. The franchise has always explored themes of separation: trainers leaving home, Pokemon parting from former trainers, families scattered across regions. Winter amplifies those feelings, yet never dwells in despair. A lost traveler meets Delibird. A lonely Pokemon finds companionship. A trainer stuck in a snowstorm is offered shelter by strangers. Time and again, winter settings become places where isolation is acknowledged and then eased. Even mysterious Pokemon like Cryogonal add to the atmosphere without becoming outright threatening. Their crystalline bodies catch starlight like suspended ornaments drifting toward the sky. They glide silently, never disturbing more than they must. Encounters with them feel less like battles and more like sightings, experiences that linger in memory because they feel rare and delicate. In colder regions, elderly characters sometimes talk about winters past, recalling blizzards that brought communities together. They tell stories of Pokemon leading them safely home or helping them survive unexpected storms. Children listen with fascination while their Pokemon lean forward curiously, aware that they belong to the next generation of those same stories. Winter serves as a bridge between ages, elders teaching patience, children learning resilience. And then there is the imagery of bells, not loud church bells or grand ringing towers, but small handheld bells tied to sleighs or hung above doors. They appear frequently in winter-themed Pokemon episodes, chiming softly whenever someone enters or leaves. The sound evokes warmth and memory, echoing compositions used throughout the games. Some cities develop signature chimes associated with winter festivals, and each note lingers long after fading. Pokemon often pause when they hear the bells, ears twitching, eyes lifting as if the sound reminds them of something older than language. The role of legendary Pokemon during winter varies, but each appearance adds depth rather than spectacle. Articuno gliding through snow-filled skies can stop entire villages mid-activity, leaving everyone staring in respectful silence. The bird rarely engages. It simply passes by, as if checking on the world before vanishing into clouds again. Its presence turns normal nights into stories that children retell for generations. We saw Articuno once, when the snow was thick and the wind was quiet. It looked like the sky itself had opened. Meanwhile, some winter Pokemon exist only through faint rumor creatures, seen only by those traveling alone at dusk, or shapes barely distinguishable against snow. This sense of myth fits naturally with holidays that already mix reality with folklore. Not everything in winter needs explanation. Some things simply happen and then fade, leaving behind soft wonder. Inside homes, trainers and families prepare simple meals meant to last through long, cold evenings. Pokemon gather around tables, receiving bowls placed carefully on the floor or set atop low stands. A Snorlax might curl peacefully near the fire. A Rowlet might snooze perched on the back of a chair. A Growlithe might stretch out near the door, keeping watch. These scenes show that while Pokemon battles are exciting, daily moments are where the bond truly forms. When storms hit, entire villages often work together to secure rooftops, clear paths, and support anyone stranded outside. Strong Pokemon like Machoke help shovel snow. Fire types melt ice from critical entryways. Flying Pokemon deliver messages when roads become impassable. Winter, more than any other season, demonstrates the idea that a world where humans and Pokemon coexist isn't just charming, it's functional. Later, as nights lengthen and blizzards grow heavier, that same world glows more beautifully. Lanterns line streets, decorations sway in slow wind, soft music flows from windows while snow falls steadily. Trainers walking home hold Pokeballs close to keep their partners warm, smiling when they feel a faint pulse of energy in return. The connection is mutual. Humans care for Pokemon, and Pokemon quietly care for humans. Even when the narrative brushes gently against spirituality, whether through ceremonies, legends, or old winter stories, it never feels heavy. Pokemon doesn't preach, it suggests. It shows characters leaving offerings under trees, tying ribbons to branches, or placing objects near shrines to thank nature for safe passage through another year. Pokemon stand beside their trainers during these small gestures, curious yet respectful, embodying a shared sense of gratitude. By the time the final snowfalls begin to fade and winter edges toward spring, the world carries subtle changes. Paths reopen, frozen lakes thaw from the edges inward, grass begins to push through melting drifts. Pokemon who prefer warmth emerge cautiously. Others retreat quietly to higher mountains, content to wait until the cold returns again. Life doesn't flip a switch, it transitions. And in those transitions, players and viewers see the deeper truth underlying all winter storytelling in Pokemon. Endings are rarely endings. They are pauses. Christmas, holidays, winter festivals, all of them function that way too. They pause ordinary life long enough for people and Pokemon to remember the things that matter more than victory or progress: rest, care, companionship, continuity, presence. And in this world, those values never feel forced. They emerge naturally from snow, from shared meals, from the sight of a Lapras carrying travelers across still water, from the glow of Auroras lighting a frozen plain, from a Delibird quietly appearing when help is needed most. Somewhere, deep across different regions, snow drifts against quiet houses while distant mountains shimmer pale blue under moonlight. A lone Stantler stands at the tree line, watching calmly. Children giggle inside, their Pokemon curled beside them, drifting toward sleep while the wind hums softly outside. Bells ring faintly in the distance. A light stays on in the Pokemon Center for anyone still traveling. Nothing spectacular happens, and yet, somehow, it feels like everything important is happening all at once. That's the magic of winter in Pokemon, not a celebration built from noise, but a season woven from stillness, kindness, and memories that quietly return year after year. Winter always has a way of reminding the Pokemon world to breathe. The snow covers footprints, the wind quiets the trees. Even the sounds of bustling cities soften until everything feels wrapped in a blanket that no one wants to disturb too much. Traveling trainers learn quickly that this season isn't just weather, it's a state of mind. You don't rush through winter, you move with it. As the days grow shorter, many regions begin to look like different versions of themselves. Streets you once walked in summer now glow with soft lights strung between rooftops. Shadows stretch earlier across icy cobblestones, and in the windows of Pokemon centers, small decorations appear nothing gaudy, just warm colors, candles, and simple wreaths. Chansey and Blissey sometimes wear little bows, not as costumes, but as gentle acknowledgments that the season means something special. Patients resting in hospital beds watch snow fall from the windows, a kind of living lullaby, while their Pokemon curl up beside them without a sound. Trainers who normally live on the road find themselves pausing longer in each town. Instead of immediately challenging the next gym or hurrying toward the next route, they stay an extra night, enjoy the local winter festival, talk to villagers, and share meals. Pokemon stay outside their Pokeballs more often, mingling by fires or walking alongside their trainers as if they too understand that time feels different now. For some young trainers, winter becomes the first season where they truly learn care. They realize they must feed their Pokemon more, give them blankets, build small shelters when camping. Fire types, usually seen as battle tools, now become sources of life, warming tents, drying clothes, thawing frozen canteens. Even a simple growlithe lying near a doorway helps keep a house warm, its gentle heat radiating outward like a living hearth. And in moments like those, the relationship between trainer and Pokemon stops being primarily about strength. It becomes about survival through trust. In certain areas, entire communities shape their year around winter traditions. Ice sculpting contests fill central squares with glittering statues shaped like Articuno, Lapras, or Vanillux. Elderly residents weave stories about blizzards so strong they change the course of rivers and about Pokemon that appeared mysteriously during those storms only to vanish afterward. The children listening sit cross-legged in snow, their Pokemon pressing in close for warmth. No one questions whether every story is true. That isn't the point. Winter folklore exists to explain the feeling of wonder that cold landscapes create. In the wilderness, Pokemon behave differently as the season deepens. Flocks migrate overhead, packs huddle together. Even solitary species find temporary communities to share warmth. Trainers traveling at night sometimes come across circles of Pokemon around natural hot springs. Snorunt, Sneasel, Spheal, all gathered peacefully. They scatter only when disturbed, but not out of fear, out of instinct, as if respecting an unwritten rule about giving one another space. One of the most touching winter visuals is the underground in Sinnoh, when frost begins creeping into tunnels and crystals catch the faint light of torches. Players dig fossils while their partners wait quietly nearby, tails swaying gently. There's no rush. The treasure isn't the only reward. It's the atmosphere, a sense that even hidden parts of the world participate in the season. And then there's Delibird, still wandering mountains with its tail pouch filled with supplies. In some stories, it appears only at the moment it's needed most. When a hiker loses the path, when a trainer collapses from exhaustion, when a family becomes trapped in heavy snow, Delibird doesn't stay long. It delivers, nods politely, and disappears as if the wind itself carried it away. People tell stories afterward, unsure whether what they saw was chance or something closer to magic. That ambiguity is part of its charm. Pokemon Go, over time, leaned even more into that warmth. Special winter snapshots, gift-sending bonuses, festive backgrounds at Pokestops, they all make the game feel less like a competition and more like a tradition. Players exchange gifts, not just for rewards, but as gestures between friends. A small icon appears next to a Pokemon wearing a cute seasonal costume, and suddenly that Pokemon becomes something to look back on. Oh yeah, that was the winter when we were all playing together. Digital memories transform into emotional ones. Winter also highlights the idea of home in a way no other season does. In the anime, returning to Pallet Town or another hometown during colder months carries emotional weight. Family dinners gather around long tables. Pokemon who grew up with trainers reunite with other household Pokemon. nuzzling each other affectionately. Even Professor Oak's lab, usually filled with research and activity, feels like a sanctuary in the snowfields blanketed white. Taros huddled together, birds perched quietly in trees. It feels safe. The theme of safety shows up repeatedly in how winter challenges are handled. Rather than presenting extreme cold as something to conquer heroically, the show often depicts characters preparing properly. They dress warmly, they plan routes carefully, they rely on each other. Heroes do not push recklessly against blizzards. They wait them out inside caves, sharing food and telling stories while the storm rages outside. Pokemon sit close, lending body warmth. There is courage in patience. The series suggests strength in not always pushing forward. And just like all traditions, winter carries reminders of those who came before. Trainers sometimes visit old mentors or stop by graves of former Pokemon companions. They leave small mementos in the snow ribbons, berries, handmade charms, and stand quietly for a moment. Pokemon bow their heads alongside them. Nothing needs to be said. Winter creates space for reflection without forcing it. One lovely detail scattered across different episodes and games is how food changes with the season. Stews become thicker, teas become spicier, treats feature berries that last through the cold, like Aspir and Oran. Pokemon eat alongside people, blowing softly on warm dishes, tails thumping with gentle gratitude. Kitchens glow late into the night, pots simmering while voices murmur softly. Even something as simple as sharing a bowl of soup feels like an important act. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the forests and towns, legendary Pokemon travel on their own paths. Articuno glides silently among clouds, rarely interfering in the lives of mortals. Some believe it appears only to those with peaceful hearts. Others say it arrives when the land itself needs balance restored. Whether these stories are literal or symbolic doesn't matter. They function the way winter myths function in every culture, offering a sense that the season is watched over, guarded by something older than anyone can fully understand. Occasionally, Pokemon like Glalie remind people that ice can be intimidating too. Its expression is hard, its shape severe. Yet even Glalie has structure, consistency, predictability. It doesn't seek unnecessary destruction. It simply is, existing as part of ecosystems that rely on cold cycles. Winter in Pokemon never feels like punishment. It feels necessary. When storms finally ease and nighttime spreads wide and clear, sky gazing becomes a seasonal ritual. People gather outside, wrapped in blankets, their Pokemon sprawled around them, watching stars appear one by one. Breath clouds the air. Someone might whisper about wishing on shooting stars or waiting for Togekiss to pass overhead. Occasionally, lights shimmer in the distance, auroras dancing slowly across the horizon, and everyone falls quiet at once. Those shared silences become memories long after the details fade. One of the most beautiful things about winter in the Pokemon world is how it treats companionship not as an extra, but as the core. Trainers rarely face the cold alone. Pokemon rarely wander snowy routes without others nearby. Even wild Pokemon often choose to travel in small groups for protection. The message feels gentle but persistent. Warmth multiplies when shared. Eventually, seasons begin to shift again. Snow thins, icicles drip, paths reopen, but winter doesn't disappear as if it never existed. It remains inside the characters and stories and, strangely, inside the players and viewers too. Every time the first snowfall returns, those emotions come back the quiet towns, the shared meals, the lights glowing softly in windows, the sound of bells, the image of Lapras crossing still water. The Pokemon world becomes familiar in a deeply comforting way, reminding us that even when everything else changes, this gentle season always finds its way home. And somewhere out there, as the last snow falls for another year, Delibird finishes one last delivery. A Blissey closes the curtains in a dim hospital room so a patient can sleep. A Frostlass glides away into the mountains. Stantler and Wydeer vanish into pine forests. Togekiss drifts overhead, unseen but somehow felt. The world exhales, quiet and content, as winter leaves behind what it always brings. Memories of warmth discovered inside the cold. Winter has a way of changing the way light works in the Pokemon world. Instead of flooding everything with brightness, it filters gently through clouded skies, spreading across the land like soft paint. Towns feel smaller, yet closer. The night doesn't feel threatening, just quiet, like a giant blanket pulled up over the entire region. And in that calm, both humans and Pokemon begin to move differently, as though they're aware that this season isn't about racing ahead, but about noticing the world more carefully. Trainers who usually charge forward, map in hand, suddenly find themselves slowing at little details. The way icicles sparkle on street signs, the slow breath of a Snorlax sleeping beneath a snow-dusted tree, the faint crunch of footsteps when Pikachu or Eevee trail behind, leaving tiny tracks that vanish by morning. Even busy cities like Lumiose or Castelia seem to hum softer, their usual energy softened by the hush that winter always imposes. On the outskirts of those cities, near frozen ponds and quiet parks, you can find trainers practicing not intense battles, but gentler training sessions. They help their Pokemon learn to balance on ice, to move gracefully in cold, to trust their footing when the ground isn't stable. Slipping becomes part of the laughter. A playful Spheal skids too far and tumbles, rolling back up with a gleeful bark. A shy Snorunt peeks out from under a scarf, slowly becoming more confident with each outing. Winter becomes a teacher not strict, but persistent. Pokemon centers turn into gathering places, glowing from the inside like lanterns. Travelers sit beside one another, whether they know each other or not, sipping warm drinks while drying gloves and scarves near heaters. Nurse Joy and Chansey never seem rushed, even when the building is busy. Their movements remain calm, steady, reassuring, and outside the windows, snow falls endlessly, making time blur until night and afternoon feel almost the same. Further into rural regions, farmers and ranchers prepare with the help of their Pokemon. Miltank gather closer in barns. Mareep cluster together, their static charge generating faint warmth. Herdier help herd flocks into shelter, tails wagging proudly at their sense of responsibility. These scenes emphasize something Pokemon quietly teaches over and over again. Survival isn't about domination, it's about collaboration. And when winter holidays do arrive, they feel woven into everyday life rather than staged. Decorations are handmade, carved from wood or shaped from snow. Children tie bright ribbons onto fences, while their Pokemon mimic them, carrying tassels in their mouths or trying, not always successfully, to help place them. Stalls open in town squares, selling hot chocolate, rice cakes, berry pies, and treats for Pokemon shaped like Pokepuffs. No one tries to rush through the festivities. They stretch across days, fading gently instead of ending abruptly. At night, the glow of festival lanterns reflects on frozen ponds where trainers skate hand in hand with their Pokemon. You see Glaceon gliding effortlessly, leaving patterns in frost behind it. A Sneasel zips playfully across the surface, showing off before stumbling into a snowbank with a sheepish grin. Somewhere off to the side, an elderly man watches the scene quietly with his lifelong partner, an old, steady dugong, whose eyes carry decades of memories. The two stand together as witnesses to another season passing, another year lived. Beyond these soft celebrations, the natural world performs its own rituals. Snow piles on pine branches, until they bow gracefully. Rivers freeze except in small, bubbling sections where Pokemon gather to drink. Wild Pokemon trace the same paths through snow day after day, creating faint trails that only they understand. Trainers sometimes follow these paths just to see where they go, finding themselves led to peaceful clearings or frozen lakes that feel untouched by time. In remote mountain passes, travelers sometimes report seeing lingering shapes in the snow, not threatening, but mysterious. A frostlass drifting too quietly to disturb the air. A solitary glalie hovering near an icy cliff, as though guarding something invisible. These encounters aren't framed as jump scares. They feel reverent, almost like seeing winter itself personified. Pokemon are neither benevolent nor hostile in these moments. They simply exist as forces of nature, reminding viewers that not everything in the world is meant to be tamed or fully understood. Meanwhile, more familiar Pokemon discover new sides of themselves in the cold. Fire types take on caretaker roles, warming human hands and melting ice from frozen equipment. Grass types learn resilience, adapting to harsh temperatures with patience. Even normally mischievous Pokemon seem to soften. A group of Piplup builds snow sculptures beside a river. A couple of Rattatas share crumbs beneath an inn porch rather than stealing. Winter brings out a collective desire to help rather than compete. Inside small houses, evenings take on a rhythm that feels timeless. Families set plates not just for themselves, but for their Pokemon, who sit close, tails wrapped around feet or wings, tucked neatly against their sides. Stories are told about legendary winters, about journeys started long ago, about Pokemon that changed someone's life in unexpected ways. Children stare wide-eyed, their own Pokemon leaning in, clearly listening even if they don't comprehend every word. These nights become the memories that characters carry with them long after they grow older. Sometimes, winter also creates reunions. Trainers who travel far return home briefly, bringing new Pokemon to meet their families. Old partners who once stayed behind rush forward to greet them, their joy unmistakable. Scenes like these remind viewers that journeys don't pull us away permanently, they give us stories to bring back. Even the music of the Pokemon world changes in winter. Soft piano melodies, faint bells, gentle orchestral swells that never quite rise too high. Every composition seems designed to encourage stillness. When players wander through snowy towns, the soundtrack doesn't push them forward. It invites them to stand still a little longer, to watch, to listen, to breathe. And there's always that sense, subtle but constant, that something magical could happen at any time. Not dramatic magic, quiet magic. A wild delibird leaving a wrapped berry on your doorstep. A Lapras appearing unexpectedly to ferry stranded trainers across an icy lake. Togekiss gliding overhead during a festival, unnoticed by most, but deeply meaningful to those who happen to look up at the right moment. Winter is generous that way. It offers wonder gently, without insisting you notice. When the cold is at its harshest, shelter becomes sacred. Caves glow with makeshift campfires, the walls glittering with ice. Trainers and wild Pokemon occasionally share space in uneasy but peaceful truces, understanding instinctively that storms outweigh grudges. A Machamp might move rocks to seal out wind, while a small Ralts sits pressed close to its trainer's leg. Once the blizzard passes, everyone leaves without ceremony, each returning to their own paths with a wordless acknowledgement of shared survival. And when at last the season begins to loosen its grip, the change is almost imperceptible. Snow melts first at the edges, dripping quietly into slush. Tiny green shoots push through cracks. Pokemon begin to move with a bit more energy, stretching, leaping, calling to one another. The air smells different. But winter doesn't vanish all at once, it lingers in memory. in the softened pace of those who lived through it, in the way trainers now understand rest differently than before. What remains is a sense that Christmas and winter in the Pokemon world are not events. They are moods, rituals, pauses, and reflections. They exist wherever people gather kindly, wherever Pokemon share warmth, wherever snow turns noisy roads into quiet streets and encourages everyone to slow down together. Somewhere, a final snowfall drifts past a quiet house. A Pikachu leans against its trainer, both of them half asleep, listening to the wind whisper outside. A Blissey finishes tidying the Pokemon Center, humming softly. Delibird disappears into the horizon, mission complete until next winter arrives. And the Pokemon world rests peaceful, gentle, holding on to the warmth it created when everything outside turned cold. Winter always seems to draw the world inward, even in regions famous for noise, lights, and endless movement. Something subtle changes when the cold settles. Buildings look like they lean closer together. Streets feel narrower, not from walls closing in, but from the way snow gently gathers along the sides. You can hear your own footsteps more clearly, and somehow, even Pokemon that are usually energetic sense the shift. They don't stop, they just move with more intention, as if they understand the season asks for gentleness. There is a feeling in the air, a quiet anticipation, like the world holding on to a secret it only reveals to those willing to slow down long enough to notice it. In the Pokemon world, winter isn't the absence of life. It's life moving carefully, respectfully, deliberately. Even wild Pokemon seem to follow unwritten rules, sharing space at water sources, taking turns at berry trees, avoiding unnecessary conflict simply because conserving energy matters more than proving strength. Near lakes coated with thin layers of ice, trainers sometimes see silhouettes beneath the surface. A Lapras passing by, a dugong drifting slowly, even a lonely seal practicing breath control near cracks in the ice. There is beauty in knowing that entire worlds continue beneath frozen surfaces, hidden but steady. Children press their faces to the ice, hoping to catch another glimpse, while their Pokemon peer curiously beside them. Those tiny discoveries become winter memories just as vivid as gym battles or legendary encounters. On snowy plains, Wardier leads careful caravans across drifts that would swallow unwary travelers. Each step seems planned, each pause timed. The Pokemon doesn't rush because winter punishes rushing. Instead, it finds the safest path, teaching those who follow how to read wind patterns, snow density, and hidden dangers. Without speaking, winter becomes a teacher in patience and observation. In quiet mountain villages, residents set small bowls of food outside for wild Pokemon berries, grains, simple offerings. They aren't traps, and they're not bait. They're gestures. Over time, patterns form. Snorunt visits certain doorsteps. Sneasel appears briefly, then vanishes back into the tree line. Sometimes a Delibird collects extra crumbs to bring farther into the woods. No one records these visits officially. They just happen, year after year, slowly becoming tradition. Inside homes, you start noticing how Pokemon help shape winter chores. A Chimecho gently rings whenever the door opens, letting warmth escape only briefly. A Castform nestles on a mantle, adjusting itself instinctively to keep air comfortable. Fire types keep kettles hot and quietly accept thanks without expecting praise. The relationship feels closer than usual in these months, as if both humans and Pokemon recognize how much they rely on each other. Winter also changes the way journeys unfold. Some trainers choose to rest, staying home or in towns until warmer months return. Others continue traveling, but their routes take longer. They stop more often. They camp carefully, There's less of the usual urgency, no desperate push toward the next badge, no frantic late-night training sessions. Instead, winter journeys are filled with thinking, with noticing, with conversations that last longer than they normally would because the night stretches gently ahead. In those conversations, stories surface, tales about seeing Articuno in the distance, gliding silently between snowy clouds, whispers of cryogonal, appearing only at freezing temperatures, hovering like floating snowflakes made of glass. Myths of ancient Pokemon awakening when the world grows quiet enough to listen. Whether true or exaggerated, these stories travel through generations the same way winter festivals do, gently, lovingly, repeated until they no longer need proof to feel real. Sometimes winter challenges come unexpectedly. A blizzard arrives earlier than expected, a bridge freezes, a mountain trail disappears beneath drifts. But when danger appears, it never becomes hopeless. A wild Pokemon digs a tunnel, another offers warmth, strangers share food. In Pokemon, hardship almost always ends with someone reaching out, and winter makes that theme especially powerful. The world isn't safe because it has no danger. It's safe because kindness exists everywhere. Pokemon Go replicates that same idea through simple mechanics, giving gifts, walking buddies, sending postcards. Those features aren't about power, they're about connection. The game subtly reminds players that winter isn't only a solitary season. Communities form through small acts, tapping, sending, trading, just enough interaction to feel like people are sharing the same cold world together. Even the way winter sounds is different. Snow mutes footsteps, caves echo with dripping water, trees creak softly in the cold. In the anime, the soundscape changes deliberately. Background music fades into distant bells or soft orchestral tones. Every detail invites calm, moments feel stretched, dialogue slows. It creates an emotional space where the viewer, like the characters, can breathe. And then there are the nights. Nights where the sky clears completely and starlight reflects on untouched snow so brightly the world seems to glow without lamps. On those nights, Pokemon and humans alike gather outside to watch the sky as if participating in an unspoken ceremony. Occasionally, auroras ripple overhead, painting fields in shifting colors. Someone always gasps, someone always falls silent, and somewhere a Togekiss drifts quietly at the edge of sight, unnoticed by most, but unforgettable to those who see it. Winter also highlights bonds formed earlier in the year. A trainer who once caught a frightened Pokemon now finds it curled protectively beside them to block wind. A partner who once hesitated in battle now confidently clears paths through snow. Growth becomes visible not through strength alone, but through trust. And there is something deeply peaceful in realizing that journeys shape relationships long after gym victories are over. Sometimes, holiday imagery simply blends into normal life. A decorated tree stands in the Pokemon Center lobby. A handmade gift sits beneath it, tagged not with a trainer's name, but with a Pokemon's. A child carefully wraps a scarf around a Piplup's neck. None of these moments are treated as unusual. They simply happen because caring is normalized rather than highlighted. As days pass and snow deepens, winter transitions from novelty to rhythm. People know which paths are safe. They recognize the tracks left by local Pokemon. Fires are lit at the same times each evening. The predictability becomes comforting. Even those who miss the freedom of warmer weather find themselves quietly appreciating the calm. When the first hints of thaw finally arrive, there's always a mix of relief and nostalgia. Snow recedes, streams break through ice, grass returns cautiously. Pokemon that stayed hidden now emerge with renewed energy. But alongside the excitement sits a quiet understanding that winter gave something valuable: a pause, warmth shared, memories stored gently in the mind, a softer version of the world where strength meant rest, patience, and care more than anything else. And as the season prepares to leave, the last snowfall drifts across rooftops like a farewell letter. A child stands at a window, a Pikachu beside them, watching flakes spiral down one last time. Somewhere far away, Delibird carries its final delivery. Blissey dims the lights in a quiet hall. Lapras glides toward deeper, unfrozen waters. The wind softens, as if acknowledging the end of a gentle chapter, one that will always return, bringing with it the same peaceful reminder that even in a universe filled with battles, adventure, and endless movement, there will always be a season meant only for slowing down, being kind, and letting the world rest. The longer winter lingers in the Pokemon world, the more it begins to feel like a shared secret between everyone who lives there. People know the storm patterns, the quieter roads, the shortcuts that only appear when lakes freeze and snow piles in deep drifts. Pokemon know them too. They sense which paths are safest, which caves stay dry, which trees bend in the wind but never break. There's comfort in that mutual awareness, an unspoken agreement between nature and those moving through it. Sometimes, travelers reach a place where the snow is untouched, perfectly smooth, stretching out in all directions. No footprints, no tracks, just silence. And then, almost magically, a single pair of prints appears out of nowhere, soft, light, belonging to some small Pokemon that has already vanished into the trees. It feels like the land itself briefly acknowledged the visitor before returning to stillness. Those moments never become dramatic scenes. They pass quietly, but they stay in memory for years. In towns built for colder climates, houses are close together, not just for warmth, but for companionship. When storms arrive, people check on neighbors automatically. The same happens with Pokemon. A wild Snom might find shelter beneath someone's porch and be given a makeshift nest of blankets and snow-cooled leaves. A lost Piplup might be escorted gently back to the river by helpful villagers. Winter gently erodes the idea of strangers. Hard seasons encourage community. Inside Pokemon centers, the soft hum of medical machines and the rhythmic beeping provide steady reassurance. Trainers rest on benches, boots drying by heaters, while their Pokemon sleep wrapped in towels. Nurse Joy moves from room to room with quiet footsteps, and Chansey brings warm drinks like it's second nature. Nobody feels like a burden. The building itself seems to exist for moments exactly like this. When snowstorms grow too heavy, sometimes even experienced trainers must wait days before moving on. They take the enforced pause as an opportunity rather than a setback. They help shovel pathways. They assist elderly townsfolk. They train indoors, not to become stronger, but simply to bond. Pokemon become more playful in tight spaces, tackling one another into stacks of hay, batting gently at snowflakes, drifting through open barn doors. Laughter replaces progress. And that shift reveals a truth the series has always hinted at. Not every stretch of life needs to move forward rapidly to have meaning. In forested regions, trees seem to stand guard. Their branches cradle snow, creating archways that look almost intentional. Wild Pokemon slip through these natural corridors, leaving trails behind that eventually fill and vanish. Nights in forests feel especially sacred. A single fire glows in a clearing. A tent flutters slightly. Pokemon huddle near trainers, while the sounds of distant snow settling echo like tiny sighs. Somewhere, a lone Frostlass drifts silently past, unseen, a reminder that winter holds stories not meant to be interrupted. Pokemon Go often recreates this feeling by encouraging players to take walks even in the cold, not long ones, not rushed ones, just enough movement to feel part of something seasonal. Spinning a Pokestop while bundled in gloves feels strangely grounding. Sending gifts becomes more meaningful when it carries a little digital snowflake along with it. The real world and the Pokemon world overlap softly, like two layers of frost on the same window. Meanwhile, winter gives trainers time to reflect on choices, friendships, and journeys. Sitting beside a campfire or in a warm inn, they sometimes realize that the Pokemon they travel with aren't simply tools of battle, but companions who shaped every memory. A once timid Pokemon now curls confidently beside the fire. A once rebellious partner now listens intently for the trainer's voice. Trust becomes visible in ways that summer never revealed. Across different regions, holiday events blend cultural traditions. Some villages celebrate with feasts, others with lanterns, others with music and dancing in the snow. Pokemon participate naturally, moving among people without barriers. Bells ring softly, fires crackle, plates and bowls are shared in easy silence. There's no rush to clear anything away, the night simply unfolds, slow and gentle. On mountain tops, where winter is permanent, travelers find shrines buried half beneath snow. Offerings of berries and charms rest untouched on frozen altars. Trainers bow, not always knowing why, only sensing gratitude feels appropriate. Pokemon mimic the gesture without being told. The moment feels ancient, older than gym badges or league tournaments, hinting that the Pokemon world has been shaped by countless winters long before trainers existed. Sometimes the most touching scenes are the smallest. A young trainer knits a scarf for their Pokemon. A Snubbull awkwardly carries cookies wrapped badly in paper. A Delibird insists on delivering something trivial, like a single berry, but does so with pride. Winter transforms everyday gestures into something symbolic, simply because they carry warmth through cold. Even legendary encounters shift tone in winter. Instead of intense clashes, they feel contemplative. A fleeting glimpse of Articuno perched quietly on a frosted cliff can feel far more powerful than an epic battle. The legend doesn't always need to be confronted. Sometimes it just needs to be witnessed, respected from afar, like a piece of living history passing through. In colder climates, Pokemon sometimes gather near hot springs. Trainers join them cautiously, relaxing in warm water while snow gathers on nearby rocks. Laughter echoes across steam-filled pools. A tired Machoke sighs deeply. A playful Psyduck splashes clumsily. Even serious trainers loosen. It is nearly impossible to worry about tomorrow when the air is quiet and the water is warm. Meals become rituals. Soups simmer slowly. Berries caramelize over fire. Aromas fill rooms. Pokemon watch eagerly, tails swaying like metronomes. Everyone eats together, and the act feels like more than sustenance. It feels like gratitude taking physical form. In that moment, no one is trainer or Pokemon, adult or child. They're simply living beings sharing warmth. And as days pass, winter settles deeper, then slowly begins to let go. Rivers crack open, birds return, ice shrinks back into shadows. But winter doesn't fade without leaving something behind. It leaves patience. It leaves memory. It leaves the understanding that rest is as necessary as movement, that the brightest adventures mean more when balanced by calm seasons of reflection. Even once spring arrives, moments of winter linger like echoes. A scarf remains folded on a windowsill. A photograph of friends taken during a snowy festival rests by a bed. A Pokeball shows faint scratches from icy climbs, now polished with care. These gentle reminders appear in small details, proof that the season mattered not because of battles won, but because of connections formed and strengthened. Somewhere out there, beyond roads starting to thaw, a final patch of snow still clings to shade beneath a tree. A lone Pokemon sits beside it, as if saying goodbye. The wind shifts, bells ring softly from a distant village, and life moves forward again, carrying winter's quiet lessons into every step that follows. Winter has a way of revealing the shapes of things that go unnoticed during other seasons. When the leaves fall and snow settles slowly on every branch and rooftop, the world simplifies. Lines become softer, roads turn into pale ribbons stretching toward distant forests. Mountains wear heavy white coats that make them seem older and wiser somehow. And through all of it, Pokemon move with an awareness that feels instinctive, as if every step they take respects the quiet. In small villages, you can see how the rhythm of life changes. People wake earlier because the light fades sooner. They gather around fireplaces instead of traveling long distances. Pokemon nap more, conserving energy as naturally as breathing. Some sleep curled tightly into balls, like Sfeel resting against a wall. Others bury themselves beneath snow mounds to trap warmth, their bodies leaving only faint humps on the surface. When trainers walk by, they can't help smiling at these soft shapes, knowing someone peaceful is sleeping inside. Children play in the silence, their laughter surprisingly gentle, as though even they understand not to break the fragile calm. They build snow sculptures shaped like beloved Pokemon, a large, round Snorlax, an elegant Glaceon, a lopsided Pikachu whose ears tilt wildly. Real Pokemon wander over curiously, touching the sculptures with cautious noses or paws, confused but amused. Those playful interactions become memories that families retell every winter, growing warmer each time. Nighttime brings its own rituals. Candles appear in windowsills, lanterns hang by doorways, flickering in the wind. Trainers take evening walks not to exercise or train, but simply because it feels right to be outside when snow falls. They talk softly about plans, dreams, and regrets, while their Pokemon walk quietly beside them, leaving double trails behind. If you listen carefully, you might hear distant bells from a sleigh, a festival, or perhaps from somewhere you can't quite place. Out on snowy routes, Pokemon behave with surprising courtesy toward one another. A hungry group waits patiently at a berry bush, while a smaller Pokemon finishes eating first. A strong Beardic nudges chunks of ice aside to create safe paths for others. Even predators seem less aggressive, hunting only what they truly need. Survival replaces rivalry. Respect replaces ego. Winter writes its own rules. Sometimes trainers stumble upon temporary shelters built by communities, stone huts, snow dens, or caves reinforced by local Pokemon. Inside these places, you might find leftover supplies labeled generously for travelers, along with burn marks from old fires and footprints from Pokemon who once shared the space. These shelters become archives of kindness. They prove that even strangers have cared for one another without ever meeting. In certain remote areas, there are legends of winter guardians, Pokemon said to appear when conditions become truly harsh, not to interfere, but to silently observe and ensure nothing disrupts the balance. Some people say they've seen ghost-like forms gliding above treetops or silhouettes pausing on cliff edges. Whether those sightings belong to Frostlass, Articuno, or something even more mysterious hardly matters. What matters is the comfort the stories bring. Winter myths make the world feel watched over. At frozen lakes, festivals sometimes unfold with the simplest joys. Trainers slide across ice, laughing as they fall, while Pokemon mimic them. Music plays softly through speakers or from acoustic instruments people bring with them. Food stalls give out warm bread and tea. No announcements, No huge entertainment acts, just neighbors enjoying each other's company as the sky slowly turns dark. Meanwhile, out in the countryside, the bond between trainers and their Pokemon deepens through quiet routine. Gathering firewood becomes teamwork. Pitching tents becomes collaborative. Cooking turns into shared tasks, with Pokemon helping stir pots or carry ingredients. Each act feels intimate, filled with mutual trust. Winter strips away distractions, leaving only relationships. Sometimes long buried rivalries thaw in these conditions. Two trainers who once clashed fiercely might find themselves stranded together during a storm, forced to share heat and supplies. There, in the stillness, grudges fade, conversations deepen. They acknowledge failures, regrets, and hopes. By the time the storm passes, the rivalry is replaced by respect. The cold has a way of reminding people what truly matters. Pokemon Go captures fragments of this feeling when players walk at night, passing decorated houses and snow-covered parks. They see silhouettes of other players doing the same, glancing down at their screens, smiling briefly in understanding. The world feels bigger and yet closer at the same time. That small connection between strangers mirrors the sense of community the rest of the franchise quietly emphasizes. In caves, icicles hang like crystal chandeliers. Sound travels differently there, softer, more rounded. Trainers whisper without realizing it. Every drip of melting water echoes like a heartbeat. Wild Pokemon peer from shadows, not territorial, just watchful. When torches or lanterns are raised, crystals reflect the light and create shimmering illusions. For a moment, even ordinary rocks appear enchanted. If winter has a central lesson in the Pokemon universe, it might be this. Strength doesn't always mean pressing forward. Sometimes it means staying where you are, surviving with grace, and protecting those around you. Pokemon like Abomasnow, Lapras, Wiredeer, Blissey, and Delibird don't dominate winter. They guide it, soften it, sustain life within it. Their stories quietly repeat through regions and generations. When seasons begin to shift, there's always a bittersweet feeling. Snow retreats slowly. Rivers wake up. Flowers push through damp earth, hesitant at first. Trainers pack away winter clothes and prepare for other adventures. But if you look closely, winter never disappears entirely. A faint chill remains in the morning air. Icicles linger in shaded corners. Memories linger deeper still. And somewhere far north, winter continues untouched, ready to return gently when the time is right. In the final quiet moments of the season, Delibird finishes its last journeys. Its wings carry it across snowy plains, toward places where it will rest until the cycle begins again. Blissey stands near the doorway of a Pokemon Center, watching the sunrise with a small smile. Lapras glides out into open water, where patches of ice break apart like drifting islands. And Stantler moves quietly along a tree line, pausing occasionally to listen to the distance, ears twitching as if hearing something beyond human perception. Winter leaves without fanfare, no grand farewell, no dramatic conclusion. It simply softens, dissolves, and becomes memory, but a warm memory, layered gently into the ongoing story of every person and Pokemon who lived through it. And as the world slowly transitions toward light and color once more, one truth remains settled deep inside everything winter touched. Kindness, rest, and closeness are not interruptions to the journey. They are part of it, necessary and irreplaceable, just like the season that arrives quietly, stays patiently, and then disappears without ever truly leaving. Winter has a way of gathering memories together, layering them gently like snowfall over landscapes that once looked busy and crowded. When the world slows, people begin to remember the journeys they've taken, the Pokemon they've met, the moments that didn't seem important at the time but somehow gained weight later. In the Pokemon world, those reflections tend to surface around campfires, on quiet porches, or during peaceful walks along snowy paths, where each breath leaves a small cloud in the air before fading away. Trainers who have spent years traveling sometimes find themselves returning to the places where their earliest adventures began. Familiar signposts poke out of snow. Old shortcuts are still there, even if hidden beneath frost. Pokemon that once seemed mysterious now greet them with calm recognition. It's like returning to a childhood home during winter. Everything feels smaller, yet more meaningful. You see how far you've come, not because the world changed, but because you did. The Pokemon they travel with feel it too. Longtime partners glance at their trainers with quiet trust, no longer seeking constant commands or reassurance. They know the rhythm, how to pace themselves in snow, when to conserve heat, where to rest. Even younger Pokemon learn from them simply by watching. Winter becomes an unspoken classroom where lessons about patience, endurance, and gentle care are passed down from one generation of companions to the next. In cities, tall buildings rise into low clouds, their rooftops blanketed white. Despite the size and bustle, there is an unexpected intimacy in winter streets. Food carts offer warm stew. Street musicians play soft, echoing melodies that drift along frozen sidewalks. Pokemon huddle near their trainers, occasionally shaking snow from their fur or feathers. You can almost feel the whole city breathing slower, like a gigantic creature settling into a comfortable sleep. Across the countryside, farms show a different kind of beauty. Fields that once stretched out in rows now sleep under smooth expanses of snow. Barn doors stay closed against the wind, glowing faintly with lamplight from inside. Pokemon like Mareep and Miltank move quietly in warm spaces, chewing hay and shifting gently. There isn't much noise, only the creak of wooden beams, the whisper of wind outside, and the steady, relaxing rhythms of living things simply being alive. On distant lakes, ice thickens and becomes a mirror for the sky. Trainers skate or slide across it with their Pokemon, laughing when they slip. Occasionally, shadows move beneath the frozen surface, reminding everyone that even when life slows, it never stops completely. A Lapras passes under the ice, graceful and slow. A dugong surfaces through a crack for air, steam rising briefly before disappearing into the cold. It all feels like a secret world visible only in certain seasons. Inside cozy inns, owners set out quilts and heavy blankets. Fireplaces fill rooms with soft, crackling noises. Trainers share stories while gently polishing Pokeballs or grooming tired partners. They talk about milestones reached, gyms won, areas explored, but the moments that seem to matter most to them are quieter ones. Nursing an injured Pokemon back to health, finding shelter in a storm, laughing with friends beside a frozen river. Winter has a way of editing memories, leaving only the warmest ones behind. Out on snowy trails, some travelers hang small charms from tree branches, ribbons, bells, carved tokens in the shapes of Pokemon. They do it as thanks for safe passage or as wishes for future journeys. Wild Pokemon sometimes collect the fallen ones and carry them away, almost as if the forest itself participates in the tradition. No one organizes it, no one announces it. It happens because it feels right. There are also places where winter feels almost mystical. Valleys bathed in moonlight where the snow glows faint blue. Cliffs where wind sings through icicles, creating tones that echo for miles. Ancient ruins buried partly beneath drifts, visited by curious Pokemon that wander slowly through corridors of stone. Standing in those places, trainers often whisper without knowing why, as if they've stepped into something older than language. And yet, even in that quiet, subtle magic, Winter remains gentle. It doesn't try to frighten or overwhelm. It simply reminds everyone that nature is larger, slower, and more patient than any adventure could ever be. The biggest lessons in these months don't come from battles. They come from waiting, from watching snow fall, from caring for companions, from realizing the world keeps turning whether you move quickly or not. When storms roll in, heavy, swirling, and blinding, people respect them. They don't force their way through if they can help it. They shelter together, share supplies, and keep fires alive. Pokemon provide warmth, guidance, and reassurance. Ice-type species, so at home in the cold, act almost like leaders. They understand the terrain, the wind, the way drifts shift. Other Pokemon trust them instinctively, following their steps. The sense of teamwork becomes almost profound. Then, after the storm passes, silence arrives. A deep, comforting silence that feels like the world pressing a reset button. Everything looks untouched again, glittering, smooth, renewed. Trainers emerge slowly, speaking in low voices as if not wanting to disturb the perfection. They brush snow from their Pokemon, share a quiet smile, and continue on, grateful simply to be there. Pokemon Go mirrors this rhythm in gentle ways, walking bonuses, winter backgrounds, gift-giving features encouraging connection during colder months. Even players bundled in coats feel part of something bigger. Screens glow softly like handheld lanterns. Each spin of a stop, each exchange of a small present, becomes another subtle thread tying people together across distances. Eventually, as with every season, winter begins to loosen its grip. The first cracks in the ice appear, snowbanks shrink, trees shake off their white coats, branch by branch. But the change is never abrupt. It's gradual, respectful, and almost reluctant, as if winter itself knows it has left something meaningful behind and doesn't want to erase it too suddenly. Trainers pack bags, plan new routes, check maps with renewed excitement. Pokemon stretch, shake themselves awake, and bounce ahead with fresh energy. Yet every now and then, they glance back at the melting snow not with sadness, but with appreciation. They know the season will return. They know the quiet will come again when it's needed. Somewhere at the edge of the world, where snowy forests meet pale mountains, a final soft flurry drifts down. Delibird watches from a rocky ledge. Lapras floats near an opening in the ice. Blissey tidies the last decorations inside a Pokemon Center before packing them away, and the season slips gently into memory, not gone, just resting. Because winter in the Pokemon world is never truly about cold. It's about warmth discovered in unlikely places, about kindness offered freely, about the shared understanding that rest has value. It is the season that whispers instead of shouts, that pauses instead of pushes, that invites everyone, human and Pokemon alike, to breathe, to slow down, and to carry that calm forward into the brighter days ahead.